Greetings everyone, and welcome back to Pep Organ. Today we're talking about the digital organ, something that causes some viewers to shudder as soon as they hear it, something that causes some organists to refuse to play at a church if they have a digital organ, and yet it's a technology that's been with us for more than 50 years now. So why is it that this instrument, this concept of an instrument, causes so much concern and intense reaction amongst certain people? Today we're going to talk about not the negatives of digital organs, of which there are some, but the actual advantages. And in fact, I'm going to give you 5 main arguments for why the digital organ is actually one of the great instruments that we should be promoting, not discouraging. So firstly, I want to talk about one of the obvious things which everyone would find comparing a digital organ to a real organ, which is tuning. And the reality is that unless you're in a church with an organ tuner who's constantly on site, you're going to have an organ that has problems, particularly with its tuning. Most places in the world have fluctuating temperature, which causes the organ pipes to change in sort of pitch, which can affect the reeds against the flues. And so you end up often having to play organs that have parts out of tune. And some organists decide to just ignore this and just play the stops like they normally would. Someone like myself actually would avoid those stops, and I think that's probably the better thing to do. But either way, you're working with compromise there, and it's not a compromise that any other musician in any other instrument has to deal with on a regular basis. Pianists typically in concert halls or wherever it is have organs that are in tune, including local venues as well, since piano tuning is quite cheap, quite affordable, and can be done only every couple years. Compared to the organ, which does require tuning sometimes every month, it's just a reality that some parts of the organ aren't going to be in tune. And so the digital organ solves all those problems. We simply can sit down at a digital organ, like this one I have here, and not have to worry about the tuning at all. And not just the tuning, but also the temperament and the pitch. You see, with digital organs, almost guaranteed feature amongst all of them is the ability to change the pitch, which means that you can both have historical pitches, such as 415 or 430, but also you can change the transposition, so you can transpose any hymn you like into any key, which is really handy. Also, the temperament choice does also allow for historical temperaments and can be changed mid-performance, so you could go from a Baroque temperament or maybe mean tone if you were playing something that really leaned into that kind of sound from the Renaissance. And then you could change your registration and change your temperament and change your organ, all those things, within the same concert and play something else. That is completely impossible on real organs or pipe organs. It's completely impossible to even conceive how that might work in the future. It's basically not a possibility. You can have transpositions on organs, but you cannot have the full extent, which is temperaments and, of course, these tuning issues, which are completely solved by the digital organ. And for someone like me, who really wants a clean, solid performance that isn't hampered by all these sort of things like an organ being out of tune, it's a non-starter for me. Having an organ that's in tune is a great thing, and we should be promoting that. So that's the first reason. Now, the second is the sound quality. Now, some people are going to immediately jump and say, well, pipes always sound better than speakers. Okay, look, that is sometimes true. There's actually also a bit of magical thinking there to think that just the nature of having pipes inside a box can be a better result than speakers. There are audiophiles who are looking for certain sounds when they're listening to a pipe organ, but let's talk about the 99% of people who don't really recognize that. And if a good set of speakers, and in this case, many speakers with different sort of controls and controlling of the bass and the treble and all of that stuff, the result should be pretty much the same. But I contest that it could even be better, because a lot of organs, the player is often sitting in a compromised position where they can't really hear the organ properly. We have an option for fold-back speakers with any of these digital organs, which allows the organist to hear perfectly exactly what's blending in the space. As well as that, you can actually have something that most pipe organs cannot have, which is surround sound. So you can actually take your whole organ and simply just duplicate it, or put parts of it on another side of the building. If you're in a big church, maybe you want to have some part of the organ at the front and some at the back. It's like an antiphonal effect. Or you could actually do something more fun, which is basically to have the exact same organ on both sides and then have the sound sort of projecting from both sides in perfect sync, in perfect harmony as well. That's pretty cool. And to do that with a real pipe organ would require the building of two identical organs, then managing the tuning of them and making sure that they actually balance. It's almost an impossibility with pipe organs, but easily doable with digital organs. So sound quality actually can be better if you're not one of those audiophiles really concerned about the sound of an authentic pipe. Now, the next argument for the digital organ is, of course, price. We know that pipe organs are very expensive to build. They are also expensive to maintain, and there is a sort of requirement eventually with pipe organs that they will need not just tuning, but maintenance and eventual restoration, perhaps eventual expansion, all sorts of different things might happen in the life of the instrument. And of course, pipe organs also have to be subjected to certain things like heritage listings, which prevents you from putting in something like a solid-state sequencer system or something that would actually improve the performer's experience of the instrument. Now, the digital organ can be expensive if they're built properly, and I'm saying that they should be, but the price almost all the time is going to be cheaper than a pipe organ. And then the maintenance costs, doubly so. The maintenance costs can be almost nothing for some of these instruments. Once you've got them up and running, they're completely self-reliant, essentially, and they work really well. I've actually had a little bit of maintenance done on this organ. I've had it for about 10 years, and so I think I've had maintenance 3 times, 2 of which being for broken switches, which actually those technologies have been replaced with more reliable parts anyway, so those types of things, I imagine in the future will be even better than they are now. But as you can see, that's not much maintenance work for 10 years of having an organ. And for a pipe organ, you have maintenance issues all the time, which will of course add to the cost. So there's also a price argument, and I think we shouldn't be elitists. We should be allowing people to get into the organ without having a huge budget. We want low budget people to be able to come and learn the organ from the piano, maybe sell their piano and use it to afford an organ. That might be a way to do it. And it is possible, but not possible with a pipe organ. Now, the fourth argument for the digital organ is the flexibility of it. And the previous points I've talked about have already fed into this idea of flexibility, and it's sort of a mindset that you actually adopt once you start to advocate for these instruments. We've talked about how you can adjust the pitch and the tuning of these instruments. We've talked about how you have a sound quality which can be controlled by speakers, and that's part of where I mean by flexibility. If you feel like part of your organ is not performing as well as it could, you can simply add more speakers. You can download a different sample set of your organ. You can change all the different settings around, adjusting the pitch, adjusting the balance of the bass and the treble, all these different things. And not just through software, but also physically, you can move the console of a digital organ, typically. I don't think there's any digital organs that are fixed in one place. They can be moved. And that also gives you physical flexibility, not just within the church or the space that you're in, but also thinking more globally, it allows sort of projects like Cameron Carpenter's International Touring Organ to exist, and also allowing places like tropical countries, which formerly couldn't have pipe organs due to the nature of the weather and the way that it affected the instruments. It allows them to have instruments too, it allows them to have digital organs. If you go to somewhere like Indonesia, they have hundreds of organs. Now, they're not the organs that we are sort of familiar with in Western countries. They're usually like electones and things, but that is another kind of digital organ. And there are a lot of people out there now in Indonesia, in churches, playing with pedals, playing different parts and things, and that's a culture of its own. And that couldn't have existed without the digital technology to be behind it. So the flexibility is about this sort of global movement to actually build an organ that is more standardized and also can do more things, right? And things that the pipe organ probably would have wanted to do, but simply cannot by the physical limitations. And that brings me to the final part of why I think digital organs have some real merits, and that is the fact that they are indeed part of the future. And the organ has been naturally evolving over many centuries, often with opposition, don't forget. There's been a lot of opposition to a lot of organ evolutions over time, but they have sort of corresponded and coincided with technological innovations. Now, the digital age, being the latest technological evolution, is almost naturally why we should be having digital organs now. We need to continue the trend of where the organ has come from and where it's going. It's a very unique instrument in that it is still evolving, and people who want to sort of cut it off in one particular time, maybe to the 20th century or the 19th or the 18th, are kind of missing the point. The organ can be these things. It can be historical as an instrument, and it can be modern as an instrument, and it can be sort of a particular time, but it also needs to evolve. And the digital organ is what's taking these ideas, all these evolutions out of the past, and showing a real continuity from the present into the future. The digital organ is what's the future of instruments, not just for the organ, but also for many other instruments which are experimenting with digital options. I think that the negative perception of the digital organ is entirely because of the poorly made versions of this instrument. And this is a problem that we perceive because we like to think about the worst examples of something when we are criticizing it. But there are many, many great examples of digital organs existing now. There are many bad examples of pipe organs. I've played many of them. So that argument that there's many bad examples can be also used for the pipe organ. And so I think that we need to have a bit of a stronger argument if someone doesn't like the instruments for why we shouldn't embrace them. So that's my 5 arguments for the digital organ. I hope you found them interesting, and please leave a comment below for what you think and where you think the organ might be going in the future. Thanks for watching.